You might have heard the Controcarro isn't being very well received, and today I will tell you why. My first indication that Wargaming were very concerned about this tank was when I got invited to super test this tank a couple of months ago. What's the big deal? Well, I don't ever get invited to super test any tank. This time around, a bunch of CCs outside of the super test community were asked to try out this tank in a controlled test, and they asked us for our opinion. The control group unanimously wanted this tank to be buffed because it was seen as kind of like weak. I was the only one in my group to report no buffs were needed. In fact, more weaknesses should have been added to this tank. Now, why this confusion? Once you play this tank, you will realize this isn't a very fun tank. No mobility, not the greatest gun, and the only strength is its armor when you are using the 10 degrees of gun depression. So if the only strength is the armor when it's using the full 10 degrees of gun depression, then what's the big deal with this tank? Why are YouTubers and streamers so against this tank in its current form? Well, if you noticed, the launch of this heavily frontal armor tank coincides with the nerf of another heavily frontal armored tank, the Kranwagen. Also a very good tank when you can make use of the 10 degrees of gun depression. So they're adding the Minotauro with exactly the same problem as the Kranwagen, which they are nerfing on the same patch. Does that make sense to you? On top of this, there's also a ton of maps being reworked in this patch 118. And if you watched my update video on 118 translated, a video I made about 2 weeks ago, these map updates basically removes many of early damage positions for light tanks and medium tanks, leaving more room or more hit points on the table and probably extending the average gameplay by another 30 seconds. The map changes literally nerfs light tanks and medium tanks by closing the more open positions and inadvertently narrowing the area of play. Now, what does this mean? It means more corridors are being created with the new map changes in 1.18. More corridors mean more benefits to armored tanks and less benefits to less armored tanks. Patch 1.18 is literally a heavy tank buff and a light tank and medium tank nerf. I got some feedback from you guys saying this tank will be good versus the 279E and the Chieftains because this is a Tech 3 tank and you don't need to jump through hoops to get it. And you have a valid point. The problem is the game is moving heavily in the necessity of armor direction. It's accelerating towards a monolithic structure of play. This new era of heavy armored playstyle is cramping out the other facets of this game that make it fun, like the elements of stealth, vision, and mobility. Now, on the subject of the tank itself, the Minotauro, it's not OP and it's not super fun to play, but on certain conditions it's very hard to kill. much like a 279E. Its frontal armor is trolling you with only a tiny weak spot on top of the turret, and it's not even the obvious front two cupolas, but it's the rear cupola that you need to hit right in the middle of the tank at the back of the turret. And if the enemy in the Minotauro is using its 10 degrees to fight against you, that rear cupola weakness will be completely disappeared. There's no way. You look at that turret, look at that cupola, the third cupola that is at the back of the turret. Here you can see it right there. That third cupola, that is the only weak spot. So if he's shooting down on you with 10 degrees, that third cupola weakness is not even going to be shown to you. You're not even going to be able to hit it if he's looking down at you with 10 degrees. Now the tank itself is not a slouch. It's not a bad tank, but it's not the greatest tank as well. 2100 hit points, 700 horsepower. The power to weight ratio is 12.17, so that gives you an indication this is a slow, sluggish, heavy tank. Forward speed 36, 12 in reverse. The rotation speed of the gun, or the the tank rotation speed is 25.03 degrees per second. The gun rotation speed 18.77. Not great, not bad. The angle that it can turn is only 45 degrees to the left and right, so you can't turn the gun backwards or to your side, 90 degrees to your side. No way it's able to do that. But the good news is you don't really need it so much, because most of the time you are frontal facing forward fighting. If you are being flanked on the sides or back, that means you are probably in a very poor position, or it's the end game and you're being flanked by high mobility tanks like mediums or lights. This is an auto loader with 5 shells and 8 seconds intra clip. The full reload is 23 seconds, which is pretty quick, but remember you have 8 seconds intra clip to fire off each shells, so that is a little bit of a bummer there. The damage is 530 alpha. You're going to be firing with each shell doing 530 damage, but again the weakness or the downside is the 8-second intra clip, and that is not very good, but still very workable. The dispersion is 0.42. You'll get it down to about 0.38 with food and consumables and all the good stuff, all the equipment. Aim time 2.21 second. In close positions it's not too bad, but here you can see him getting caught out from that 50B. 50B gladly taking a hit because it takes 8 seconds for him to fire his second shot. All that 50B needs to do is make sure that he hits the lower plate easily, because that was a position where he couldn't have backed off, and his lower plate, of course, the universal weak point of almost any tank. He got caught out there with his pants down, so that 50B took full advantage of it, take one hit and finished off that Minotauro. This is a very good game from the Minotauro, almost 10,000 damage in his tank, but it is not very often you can pull off one of these games, and even with a 9,000 plus damage, he did not manage to carry or win this game for his team. It took the other tanks to do the job for him. In this case, it was that STRV 103 that came clutch for his team. This 268 was AFK and died. The STRV carried the game for his team and managed to win this game for the team. But this is my opinion on the Minotauro. Not a super strong tank, not the greatest tank of all, but very annoying to kill, and imagine them working in pairs or in platoons. This is a tank that I feel you could win the game for your team, but you are not necessarily going to be the hero for your team. You can use your armor to hold a corridor, or you can use your armor to push, not next to a heavy tank, but be the point tank, be the leader in your group, pushing forwards. If you died or you did 1000 damage and sacrificed yourself, you are difficult to kill, and the time it takes to kill you and focus the energy on you, your team could probably win the game for you. So this is why this tank is coming into discussion so much among all the content creators, streamers and YouTubers, because this tank might not be good for this game, and I don't think it's going to be good for this game. What do you think? Let me know, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye bye.